What, if anything,
Another set of disturbing testimony from a Canton police officer. A lieutenant who processed
because of the weather. Sergeant Lank had notified Norfolk County CPAC. He had advised them that
Sustained.
I'm sorry, can you rephrase the question, please?
Wow, I'm not sure if I've seen that one before.
The witness prompting Lally on what to do next.
We decided on how we were going to process the area. Our concern was there were some light pink spots in the snow, and we thought it may be blood. So we were discussing how to get to that, uncover the blood safely. We decided we were going to process the scene with a leaf blower. I figured we could direct the snow off the area in a controlled fashion. At that time, Sergeant Good volunteered to go get a snow blower. It was a unique scene. There was snow. I had never processed a scene in the snow.
I found that interesting. You know, this happened 2 years ago. This guy doesn't look particularly young. He lives in Boston. This was his first time processing a scene in the snow.
I had seen a leaf blower used in the snow, and it's quite effective at being controlled. So that's why it was readily accessible.
So wait, you have or haven't processed a scene in the snow?
And I thought that was the best method at that time. It's me operating the leaf blower and at the scene where John O'Keefe was discovered.
And who is operating the leaf blower in these videos?
I am.
You just said that, Lau.
See, it removes the snow. I was removing the snow layer by layer. And right here, you can see it exposing the cocktail glass. You're going to see red spots appear as I remove it layer by layer. These pink spots start to turn to be dark red spots.
And what you would collect of the blood?
Yep, we took 6 blood samples, yes.
And how were you able to sort of collect the blood samples on scene?
Well, the blood samples, because they were frozen, we debated on how to collect it. We didn't think swabbing was going to be easy to do if it was frozen. So we decided on finding some type of temporary plastic evidence container. We were able to find large cups, and we took 6 samples. We bagged the 6 samples.
Well, what Lally doesn't want you to know is where they got the solo cups from and what type of bag they bagged the evidence in. A Stop and Shop bag, and they got the solo cups from a neighbor. And why does this video from the Sally Port look so shoddy? This is from
He dons a pair of gloves. And he exits, and he's going to come back with some tools. He places his toolkit on the tailgate.
And what, if anything, do you observe him do after that?
He begins to work on the housing of the tail light.
All right, now it's time for some real lawyering.
Did you take notes when you were at the scene?
No.
Did you go back to the station and memorialize your findings and your conduct at the scene by taking notes back at the station?
No, I did not.
So you have no notes and no report about anything that happened at Fairview on the 29th?
Not myself, no.
Were you ever instructed by any superior? You're pretty high up in the ranks. You reported to whom?
At that time, I reported to the deputy chief of police.
Right, either the deputy chief or the chief.
Correct.
Did either the deputy chief or the chief instruct you, Lieutenant, don't worry about writing a report in this case?
No, they never said anything like that.
You would agree that it's one thing to respond to a scene, it's another thing to actually gather evidence at a scene.
That's correct.
Especially a scene where it's a potential, at that time, a potential homicide of a police officer.
That's correct.
Lieutenant Gallagher goes on to describe what happens when he goes back to the scene 3 days later.
And you said, I directed them to where John O'Keefe's body was found, correct?
Yeah, I showed him, yes.
But in fact, you never saw John O'Keefe's body, did you?
That's correct.
Okay, so you were giving them information that you had about which you had no personal knowledge, correct?
I had knowledge from other officers. I did not see John O'Keefe at the scene. He was transported to the hospital. That is correct, yes.
Right. So you couldn't determine exactly how he was positioned, right?
Not precisely.
From head to toe, right?
Not precisely.
Where his arms or his hands were.
That is correct, yes.
He's a 6'2" man, correct?
I don't know.
You don't even know that?
I don't know his size, no.
If I told you
Weird.
that he's over 6 feet tall, would you have any quarrel with that?
If Mr. Lally told me, I would take it as fact.
Fair enough.
And
For purposes of my
that's
question,
the
you
problem.
don't want to take my word for it, but
He's trying to signal to the jury not to believe Jackson.
there's a better than 6 foot margin for where he would be situated in the snow, correct? From toe to head.
Correct.
And the details matter in a case like this. Any investigation, the details matter.
Sure they do.
Accuracy is vital in a homicide investigation, correct?
Correct.
You did find some blood droplets. We saw it on the screen, correct?
Correct.
You also found part of a drinking glass, correct?
That is correct.
Did you did you endeavor to make a diagram of exactly where those items were found?
No.
You're aware, you were the former chief of detectives?
I was a detective sergeant.
Detective sergeant. You were supervisor over detectives.
Correct.
You're aware what cross coordinates are in measuring a crime scene, correct?
Yes.
You take a stable item like a flagpole, for instance, that might be one that doesn't move. You measure exactly from a compass position, exactly north or exactly west, a number of inches, maybe even down to meters and millimeters if you.
Well, Jackson, we are trying to do a cover up here, so of course we didn't apply that technique.
Yeah, we don't employ that process.
So you don't employ a process where you could measure something from a known item north, south, east, or west, and then measure it from another known item and have an exact cross point of where that's.
We don't typically exercise in that in our investigative unit.
You knew how to do that, though.
Yes.
I mean, you've been trained on how to do that.
Yes.
But you didn't employ that technique here.
No.
So the glass, where the glass was found, it's sort of an estimate.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. And where the blood was found, that's kind of an estimate also.
Yeah, we would guess that would be where his body was. Yes.
Okay. You just used the word guess.
Yes.
Right? But if you had actually documented it using cross coordinates, you wouldn't have to guess. You'd know exactly where the tip of his head was, where the tip of his toes were, correct?
No.
Why not?
Because he wasn't there when we got there.
Fair enough. When I say you, I meant other officers. If someone had employed that before he was moved, they could have figured out exactly how he was situated, where he was in that yard, correct?
It would never happen. Life-saving measures come first. The officers are not going to start measuring while first responders are conducting life-saving measures. It doesn't happen.
That's exactly right. But once the body was moved, for instance, Officer Saraf, who's literally standing there, could have said, okay, I just saw the tip of his head right here. He's now on the gurney. And he could have measured that, right?
He could have, yes.
And then he could have said the tip of his toes were right here, and he could have measured that.
Yes.
And certainly, when there's no life-saving measures at play, you could have done the same thing with the drinking glass and the blood spots.
That's correct.
And in terms of recovering those blood spots, I'll get back to that in a second, but in terms of recovering those blood spots, you indicated that you used temporary evidence containers, correct?
Plastic cups, I said, yes.
Were you the ranking officer on scene when you arrived?
Yes, sir, I was.
So either having been tasked by one of your superiors or because you were the ranking officer on scene, did you take over the coordination of the preservation of that crime scene?
Yes, I did.
Now, what you're about to hear doesn't sit right with me.
You also contacted Brian Albert's neighbor, a gentleman by the name of Tom Kelleher, correct?
That is correct.
And you wanted to let him know that you were responding over to the scene.
Yes, he was the lieutenant in charge of detectives at the time.
Lieutenant,
Interesting.
you found what you thought was blood initially, right?
That's correct.
Pink in color, reddish in color.
Correct.
And you began the process of removing layers of snow, in other words, dusting the area with a leaf blower.
That's correct.
Had you ever used a leaf blower in a crime scene preservation effort?
First time.
First time. And you indicated your testimony was temporary evidence containers to collect that blood, correct?
Yep, we utilized cups, plastic cups.
Those were red Solo cups, right?
That's correct.
The same kind of red Solo cup you drink beer out of at a barbecue?
Yeah, sure, you could.
Objection, Your Honor. Strike.
I'll allow it.
There's nothing special about the red Solo cup?
Other than their plastic, nothing special.
And where did you get those red Solo cups?
We got them from Lieutenant Kelleher.
So in other words, you got the, to use your words, the evidence containers from a neighbor.
Correct.
He had some Solo cups in his house.
We asked him if he had any plastic containers, any type of plastic container that we could utilize.
How far were you from Canton PD? From 34 Fairview to Canton PD? Give me an idea.
Mile and a half.
So even in really bad weather, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, is that right, to drive?
Sure.
You didn't go back to Canton PD to get actual evidence containers, correct?
We wouldn't have temporary plastic containers that what we were looking for. We're looking to take samples of snow. We wouldn't have had, I know for a fact we did not have those. If we needed bags, needle containers, things of that nature, we're all set. But as far as plastic containers that we wanted to utilize, we didn't have them.
Do you have any glass containers?
No.
So Canton PD does not have or utilize evidence collection containers that are plastic?
We have needle containers that are plastic. We have blood swabs that are in plastic containers. But for what we wanted to take a sample, we did not have. So we improvised.
My next question is, certainly Canton PD employs and owns sterile swabs.
Correct.
Sterile swab is in a container that's long, and usually the swab is connected to the lid. Any clear taillight material?
I did. I did not.
You did not see any black plastic material?
No.
You certainly didn't see 45 pieces of plastic material?
I did not.
If you had found a broken glass, if you find a broken glass on somebody's yard in a situation like this, did that seem out of place to you?
They were coming from a bar. It didn't seem totally out of place, no.
At the time that you found the broken glass, would you rationally think, well, maybe the rest of this glass is inside the residence?
No.
You did not think that?
No, there was a reason that I didn't think that.
Did you think that, well, let me ask you this. Did you ever go inside the house to search for the other part of the glass?
Absolutely not.
Because you made up your mind initially where that glass came from.
Objection.
You can answer that, sir.
No.
Did you search the house for any other matching glasses?
No, no.
Matter of fact, you didn't search the house for any physical items, did you?
Of course not.
Is that because that house belonged to a Boston police officer?
No, it's because it requires probable cause, as you know, which we did not have.
Or at least you didn't think you had at that time?
We knew we didn't have it.
Did you seek it from a judge?
I'm familiar with what probable cause is.
Did you ask for consent to search the house?
We wouldn't do consent, and that's in a death investigation.
Yeah, that wasn't my question. My question
No,
was,
I did not.
okay. Is that because you were at the house of a Boston police officer?
No, it's because we wouldn't do it. Because if consent is denied, we still don't have probable cause, and we still couldn't search the house.
But you never asked, did you?
Never asked.
In that conversation that you agreed with Chief Berkowitz that Canton should be recused, correct?
He agreed with me.
And the reason for that recusal was because of the relationship between the Albert family and the Canton Police Department.
No.
What was the
Yes.
reason for the recusal?
The reason was we had a Boston police officer on another Boston police officer's lawn, property, and that property owner was the brother of somebody in our investigative unit.
Okay. That's one way to put it. Another way to put it would be because of the Albert family having a relationship with the Canton Police Department.
It has to do with Detective Albert having a relationship with his family.
Right. Or the other side of that is his family having a relationship with Canton Police Department.
Objection, Your Honor.
You said that there were, other than Brian Albert and Jennifer McCabe, there were 3 or 4 other people in the house.
Yes.
Were those 3 or 4 other people in the house at the time that John O'Keefe was found dead or dying on the lawn?
I don't have the answer to that.
Did you think that might have been an important thing to find out?
Again, I didn't think of that at that time, and I didn't think it was important at that time. I knew that Sergeant Lank had already interviewed people in the house.
You had what you knew at that time, Lieutenant, was you had an officer, a Boston police officer, who was either dead or dying on the front lawn of a house with a bunch of occupants, and you didn't think that it was necessary to investigate or interview those occupants yourself?
No, I did not. At that time, I wanted to not participate in investigative interviews.
You did tell Lieutenant Tully in your interview with him, you volunteered that Brian Higgins was not present when you went back to the house, correct?
I didn't believe he was.
What, you didn't believe he was?
No, I don't recall Brian Higgins being there.
Okay.
I don't recall who the other people were at that time.
But Brian Higgins was not one of them.
I don't know the answer to that. He could have been. I can't say with certainty.
You know Brian Higgins.
I do.
Obviously, you know him well.
I do.
Matter of fact, you occupy sort of the same space at Canton PD, correct?
That is correct.
Did you go back after that series of unrecorded interviews? Did you go back to Canton Police Department and work the rest of the day?
Yes.
Brian Higgins was also at the station for nearly the entire day.
Again, I don't recall that.
You're aware that Brian Higgins had been granted a key card for the station?
Yes.
I'm guessing that is a relatively rare thing if you're not a Canton police officer to have a key card and full access to the station.
There were a couple of ATF agents that had that access, yes.
Okay, but he was one of them.
He was one of them, yes.
Is that access restricted, Lieutenant? In other words, does his key card work the same as your key card?
I don't know the answer to that.
He would have, to your knowledge, he roamed throughout the station at will, correct?
I don't know how he roamed.
Actually facilitate the removal of that light, right?
I contacted dispatch to ask Officer Wanless to return.
And you knew at the time that Officer Wanless was a sworn Canton police officer.
That's correct.
But Lieutenant Gallagher, you told us just a few minutes ago that you and the chief, actually you and the chief, agreed that the Canton Police Department was completely recused from this case and the investigation based on a conflict of interest, correct?
No, you're spinning it. What I said was from participating in investigative interviews.
So they could take part, Canton Police Department could take part in any other part of the investigation, according to you, with the exception of investigative interviews?
We can open doors. We can facilitate things, yes.
Remove taillights?
There's nothing, no. Yeah, if it's an assist, round peg, round hole, absolutely, yes.
Okay, so in other words, Canton Police Department, notwithstanding the conflict of interest, was still allowed to participate in the investigation of the Karen Reed matter.
There was no conflict of interest. I said appearance of conflict of interest, so we have to be careful. I didn't believe there was a conflict. I honestly believe we could have investigated this case, but it wasn't the appearance of such a conflict.
You also didn't believe that there was probable cause to search the house either.
I know
That answer will step. It's stricken, and so's the question.
Okay, but we want to know the truth. We want to know what happened.
Sustained.
Canton Police Department was allowed to facilitate the removal of that light.
Yes.
And during the course of the removal of that light, that taillight was broken, correct?
That's correct.
And shattered.
Yes.
With parts of it that were falling onto the ground.
I don't think there was anything falling on the ground at that point.
So now we do have evidence that that taillight, in some way, shape, form, or fashion, was broken or broken more once it was inside the Sallyport in Canton PD's custody.
You're going to have to rephrase that. I don't understand the broken more part.
During the removal process, that light was broken even more.
No.
Just take a look at that photograph and tell me if you recognize it.
I don't recognize the photographs. First time I've seen it.
Do you recognize what's depicted in the photograph?
It's a broken taillight.
Does that appear to be the taillight that was removed during the process that we saw in the video just a few minutes ago under direct examination?
I can only assume it is. I've never examined the light.
So you can't assume. So can you answer the question, Lieutenant?
No,
You don't recognize it?
no.
Okay, and were you, I didn't see you on the video, but it was a very dark video. Were you there?
Yes, I'm in the gray shirt.
Okay. Were you there as Officer Wanless was actually removing the taillight from the vehicle?
Not sure. I'd have to watch the video again.
Okay. Do you recall if pieces and parts were being broken off and shattered while he was removing it?
Not at all.
May I approach?
Yes.
Jackson asks where the 6 cups of blood were stored during those 3 days.
Sit for the 3 days between January 29th and February 1st.
In a refrigeration unit in temporary evidence.
And is there a log to sign in and sign out to make sure that the chain of custody of items like this are maintained?
The evidence officer keeps that log, yes.
Is there any log, Lieutenant Gallagher, of these items being booked into the temporary evidence locker?
There should be, but I don't know for a fact, but there should be, yes.
Yeah, he's
I
skirting
agree there
around
should
this
be.
issue.
I'm asking you if there is.
I don't know the answer to that.
The fact of the matter is, there is no log or document or report ever showing that these items were ever booked into the temporary evidence locker at Canton PD. Isn't that right?
I don't believe that's accurate.
Do you have that evidence log?
I don't. I don't have access to the evidence log.
Could you get access to the evidence log?
No.
You're a supervisor at Canton PD.
That's
Why would you
correct.
not have access to the evidence log?
I think only 2 or 3 people have access to evidence.
Who would they be?
The evidence officer,
Which is who?
Paul DiGiapietro, Sergeant,
Can you spell that for us, please?
DIGIAMPIETRO.
Who else?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm assuming the chief of police,
Chief Berkowitz, I would assume.
most likely.
Deputy Chief.
But I don't know. Possibly, yes.
Head of detectives?
No,
Any other lieutenants or supervisors?
I don't believe so. I know I don't have access as a lieutenant.
If there's no evidence log of an item being booked into evidence, that's a pretty good indicator that it actually never made it into the evidence log, evidence locker, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
We do know that wherever it went, the blood items went back to, and the glass went back to Canton PD, correct?
That's correct.
You recognize what's in the middle of the photograph?
Yes.
What is that?
Those are the plastic cups with the coagulated blood.
Do you see on the top of the photograph the same rag
I do.
with the same markings?
Yes.
That appear that those unsealed cups with liquid blood in them are situated right near the right rear quarter panel of the SUV. And this appears to be evidence item 40. You see the same white rag,
Yes.
and you see the same evidence bag, Stop and Shop bag, correct?
Correct.
And it's filled with 6 solo cups
Correct.
with what appears to be liquid blood.
Correct.
For instance, not just inadvertent cross-contamination. If somebody wanted to touch something on that bag, on those cups, and then touch the vehicle, they could easily do that with that juxtaposition of the open blood next to the back of the rear of the car.
Objection.
Sustained.
Lieutenant, if somebody was so inclined, that situation could provide an opportunity for evidence tampering, couldn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.